So welcome, Rashid Kotwal. Rashid, you have been a client over the years. You've been on my list since the beginning of time,
Indeed.
and I've always appreciated your perspective on your work. You're a consultant and coach in the business development field, similar to me, but in a lot of ways different. So I'd like to ask you, how are you an ordinary visionary?
So this was an interesting question for me, and I thought, okay, so we're in the age of AI, and I know that
Yes,
you've been writing a lot of stuff on AI, and I've been using it quite extensively. A number of them, ChatGPT being one of them. Okay, and so I said to ChatGPT, given everything you know about me, which is obviously quite extensive, um, what what makes me an ordinary, in inverted commas, visionary? Okay, and this is what I came up with. And I thought it was quite insightful. It
great.
said, "You see the big picture while staying grounded in reality." And I thought that was pretty true. And it basically went on to say, unlike idealistic visionaries who dream without execution, I basically blend strategic foresight with practical implementation and equip business leaders with the systems, structures, and accountability to turn their vision into reality. And I thought that was pretty good. Okay.
Good.
Then it said you would transform the complex into the achievable. Rather than overwhelming people with abstract leadership concepts, I focus on practical. So everything I do is about practicality. How do we actually take something and use it?
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
the next one it said was bridge the gap between strategy and execution. And I just don't tell people what to do. People especially stuck in tactical firefighting, which most people are. I help them step back, think strategically, and provide the guidance, structure, and accountability. Now, of course, the irony of all of this is that I don't necessarily do it for myself. But that's always the irony of expertise.
That's an interesting one, isn't it? Because when you're self-employed, you're helping people, but it's also got to be a growth process. It's like, how am I adhering to this? Am I following my own advice? Or am I, like most people, a hypocrite to some extent, right?
I think to some extent we're all hypocrites, and I think to some extent we all have imposter syndrome, and and we make excuses. And I think one of the excuses that I made, and Barbara, my wife and business partner, who pulled me up on this the other day, and she said, "Hey, listen, you keep making this distinction between running a practice where essentially you're it, you and I are it,
Yeah.
versus what we would consider a traditional business where you have staff or people to do things." And she said, there is no difference. Okay.
Okay.
You still have to have systems. You still have to have the vision, the goals, the whatever. And even though if you stop, ostensibly the business stops, it doesn't have to. You have IP that can be disseminated in different ways. You can bring other people on to leverage, to license, all of those sorts of things. So there is no difference. So stop making that an excuse.
Well, as an excuse, it's not too good, but the independent lifestyle as a lifestyle ain't bad
No, that's right.
because
Exactly.
you know
Exactly.
I we lack the leverage that you have with employees, but you really reduce the risk in so many ways. So it's just what it is. It's a different way of living and working, and I I couldn't imagine doing it any other way.
No,
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, if I look over we've been, 25 years, and if I look over the last 25 years, there's all sorts of stuff that we've been able to do that have been, no way could we have done any of those things if we'd been employed in the traditional sense. Now, obviously,
right.
there were other trade-offs that didn't happen, uh, but all in all, this was a good decision.
Yes. Can you give me 1 second? I knew there was
Sure.
something off. I got to turn my lights on. It's not light enough in here. There we go. I'll just edit that out. No problem. Okay. So we've made the decision to be independent, and you're doing your best to put systems in place and support people, et cetera, et cetera. What is it that you think really makes your work different?
Look, on one level, I bring a whole bunch of expertise and experience. Now, that could be said for a whole bunch of people. It's so what I did was I created a simple model which is like a Venn diagram, which says expertise and experience and essence of who you are. And it's that essence of who I am as an individual that I bring to the table and says, okay, these are my values, these are my beliefs. Now, of course, you either vibe with them or you don't, or like anything. But it's that combination of these, me calling a spade, essentially, basically nicely saying to somebody, hey, your baby is ugly, honestly. Okay.
Your baby is ugly.
I had this conversation with somebody the other day.
That's not an easy thing to do.
No, and the guy happened to be from India, and I said, okay, so what's your business? And his business was effectively doing PowerPoint type presentations for companies. And I said, okay, so you've been doing this for 15 years. Your annual turnover in Australian dollars would be about $186,000 a year. And I'm going, 4 people, $186,000 a year. That's not a lot of money. Maybe for India, but even in India, it's not a lot of money. And I said, mate, honestly, you have a business model that isn't working. So you can, I said, look, if you keep going down this track, I can't help you. It would be unfair of me to say, hey, I'm going to, because I said, ultimately, you've got a product or a service that you're providing that people think it's a nice to have if there are no other competing priorities. And everybody has competing priorities as to where they're going to spend their money. Okay.
Yep.
If I take an example of a recent client where part of what we do is we interview their clients, who are usually senior executives, to find out why they bought, where they could improve, how they could go about doing things better. And with this particular client, it was quite obvious that one of the executives, in fact, said they don't stand up to us. If we're going down the wrong path, they don't say, stop, let's just reconsider. They just go along with it. And that has cost us, this is from the executive, that has cost us a significant amount of rework, lost opportunity, this, that, and the other. And I brought this up with them and I said, and this is an interesting thing because it comes down to something that I call, and I didn't coin this phrase, it was coined by a guy called Derek Gatehouse, executive rapport. And executive rapport means, do you have the innate primal, and it is primal, ability to call a spade with somebody you consider to be higher in the social order, either money or status or whatever it is. Okay.
Sure.
If you don't have it, it's going to be very difficult to confront issues and say to somebody, hey, but that is what senior executives want. A senior executive doesn't want another yes person. I was going to say yes man, but that's politically incorrect.
Yeah,
they don't want sycophants.
No, but not even sycophants. It doesn't have to be that bad. They don't want another employee.
No, they want somebody
maybe
who is...
some people do. Sometimes you just want another person to do a task. But if you're a consultant, you want them to dig in and point out things that they have to change. Yeah. And instead of, anything you want, we'll do whatever you need, blah, blah, blah. They're really not serving their clients, though.
They're not serving their clients. And I'm a big fan of Alan Weiss, who you interviewed recently. And that's exactly what he does. I mean, he says, listen, this is what you need to do.
Yeah. And it's hard for us to really value our services if we're coming from an employee mindset. Mm-hmm. And the thing is a lot of people have employee mindsets because they were employees before they started out on their own.
Yeah.
And they didn't grasp this whole thing. Well, I don't want to be an employee. I want to be someone who's an expert, a guru, whatever, whatever you want to call it, so I can really help people. So I have to kick people's butts. I have to kick my clients' butts.
Well, that's what they're paying you for, ultimately. Yeah.
That's what they're paying you for. And I never found that particularly easy. Um, but I worked hard at it. I mean, I want people to succeed, right? You
Yeah.
want people to
Hmm.
succeed.
Hmm. Yeah.
Now, now, when you take that position, I don't know what the position of a consultant, a trusted advisor, someone who can hold your feet to the fire. How has that resulted in changes in your clients? What's happened because you've done that?
Look, the interesting thing is okay. I'll tell you when it hasn't. Okay, when I haven't done it. Okay, and I had a client where they had about 30, 40 employees, but there were two owners. Okay, and every one of the calls that we had over a period of 3 months, one of them was using it as a therapy session. He just needed to speak for an hour to unload all of this stuff that was going on with him. And I didn't intervene forcefully enough and say, hey, this is not useful. Okay.
You didn't say, "Hey, look, I'm not a therapist.
I'm not a therapist.
Get a
Okay.
therapist if you want to handle this stuff."
Yeah.
Great. Maybe you need that.
Yeah. I'm not a professional friend.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Because the original engagement said, okay, they want to grow the business, they want to improve the blah, 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 all of these things.
Yes.
But at the end of the 3 months, the other partner said to me, look, we really wanted someone to hold us accountable and say, no, you said you were going to do this. Why haven't you done it? And I thought, okay, that's interesting. Okay. So I did not, by not pushing them and just saying, stop, this is a conversation that is not useful. Allowed, they didn't get the result. I didn't get to keep the client. Now, as it happens, he is going to come back and do some more work with us, but that's neither here nor there. But it was an interesting lesson.
Yeah. It seems an important part of the client engagement is to set expectation and ground rules at the first part of the engagement. And often we don't do that. We do a proposal. This is what I'll do. This is what we'll cover. This is where we'll go. But we don't set those ground rules.
Yeah, we
so
don't.
This is what I expect of you. I expect we will agree on work you will do, and I expect you to do it.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that, don't make that promise.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't, I want to stretch you, but I don't want to also give you impossible stuff that you can't do.
Yeah, that's right. And someone else I was working with says, it's up to you to implement. I can give you all the strategies, but if you don't actually implement, then nothing is going to happen. And then you can't blame me. And he made an interesting observation. He says there are people who go from coach to coach to coach to coach to coach to coach. Okay. But the common denominator is you. Okay.
Right.
If it hasn't worked with the first one, and it hasn't worked with the second one, and it hasn't worked with the third one, where's the pattern here?
Yeah.
It's not as if all these people were idiots.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there's a lot of coaches that aren't very good.
Well, look, I'm sure there aren't.
But that's that's another issue, really.
That's another issue.
Yeah. So, given your expertise and your ability, this was always, I've talked about this in so many interviews. I feel I'm doing therapy on myself sometimes when I talk about this. It's like, what do you do when a client gets stuck? What do you do when a client doesn't move forward? What do you do when it feels like a therapy session? I said, well, how did you do with that outreach? Well, I didn't make any calls. None? No, I didn't make any. I'm thinking about one particular person. And, probably I should have just fired him. I said, look, you don't seem to be interested in doing what you need to do to get clients. I'm not asking you to do anything really difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I realize it is pressing really against your comfort zone to do that. And it's interesting. So, you can't help everybody, but was always thinking, how do I motivate people? What tools can I use? What can I bring to bear? What can I do,
Well, I think that's an interesting question because I think more and more I've realized that you can't motivate anybody to do anything. They either want to do it or they don't. And they either have a big enough reason for themselves to do it or they don't. And that goes for me as well. Okay. So, if there's no reason for doing something, then why would I do it?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I've just taken on an exercise program,
Mm.
and I don't want to exercise. I would rather remain a blob, you know, because it's hard. It's
Yeah.
difficult. It's painful. And so I have to see, well, what's the bigger why? Well, I want to feel more fit. I don't want to get decrepit in my old age. I have to really look at my own motivation and then find a system that I can use that I can exercise every day.
Yeah, and
And
I think
it's
it also has to be easy and doable because I think that's part of
it can't be
these.
impossible. Yeah, we push
Yeah,
ourselves too hard sometimes.
yeah, and I think
I'll run a marathon starting tomorrow. No, you won't.
right.
You'll kill yourself.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's what stops. I know I have a default position that I'm working very hard to change, and that is my first default position is no, it won't work.
Ah,
Okay.
so that's just a kind of habitual mindset that
Yeah,
you
it's a
have,
habitual
right?
mindset,
It
and
won't work.
every time it comes, if I listen to someone with a suggestion, my thing is, oh, that won't work. But hang on, huh? Why not?
Why not?
And what if
Really?
it did?
Yeah.
And it's been really quite interesting because I have to consciously stop myself and go, hey, hang on, stop looking at the negative, start looking at the positive.
Yeah. I I'm always talking to people about ChatGTP, but that's not a bad tool to use that. I'm thinking
Mm,
of doing that. What are the positives and negatives? And they'll run them out for you like that. And it's
mm.
like, okay, although this difficulty, the opportunity is this, this, and this. Here's a good place to start. We're so ensconced in our own little brains,
Mm.
our habitual brains that have always done things a certain way.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think the other interesting thing is accountability. I know personally that I hate it, but it's
You
something that I
you
need to
hate
do.
accountability.
It's just interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. And when you're on your own, you're both the boss and the worker.
Mm,
You set the goals and you do the work. And I don't know, we both managed to do that. I mean, you've been in business for quite a few years. I was in business for 40 years, and somehow I don't. It's an interesting thing. Why do some people have the drive to be self-employed
mm,
and to do a
mm,
project and make it work? Or I redid my website recently, and I did it in a day. I just sat down
mm.
and took the old website and turned it into the new one. It wasn't that hard,
Yeah, I think with a lot of these sorts of things, I know I tend to make it bigger than Ben Hur, and um, I've got someone in my circle, and his whole mantra is progress, not perfection. And
yeah,
I think
yeah,
certainly for
yeah,
myself, being that in inverted commas perfectionist, I go, oh, it's got to be this, and it's got to be this, and it's got to be this. But hang on, why don't we just start with this and see how that goes?
yeah. Did you read a lot of literature in that domain when you started your business? I mean, I read a lot of stuff from Think and Grow Rich to, you name it, the Seven Habits by Stephen
Hmm.
Covey.
Hmm.
I was always reading stuff like that to sort of create a possibility beyond my little thinking because I hadn't done a lot of things. So I had to
Yeah.
create what is possible and feed that kind of
Hmm.
thing.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think I started with Dale Carnegie, How to Influence Friends and, Win Friends and Influence People, even when I was probably a teenager,
Oh
you know?
yeah,
And then,
yeah,
and interesting aside, it's still considered one of the most popular books on the planet, even though it was written in 1935 or whatever it was. Okay, I was listening to a podcast where they were talking about this, and it was really quite interesting. So I've been a big proponent of Michael Gerber, E-Myth, all of those sorts of things. Okay, from a
sure,
very long time ago, and
sure.
and yes, I'm constantly looking at ways to improve. what I find really interesting is I can see it for other people. If I'm talking to somebody, I can say, "Oh, you need to do bang," and lay it out. Okay.
Yep.
And what I have not done well for myself is detach myself from it and say, "Okay, Rashid, what are you going to do? Bang, bang, bang," and then do it. Okay. Which is an interesting.
Yeah. Well, I always found it easier to coach somebody on something that I've had a breakthrough with and done myself. It's like, give a presentation. I've handled that. I can show you. I can support you.
Hmm.
Whereas if you've never really done a presentation, they have to do a presentation. You got to then do your homework and do a presentation
Hmm.
and figure it out. And I always felt I was playing catch up. Oh, I got to learn this. I got to learn this. Well, it's just the way it is.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
we're constantly learning, we're constantly improving. But I think the thing is not to think that knowledge is power, implementation is power. Knowledge by itself is great, but if you don't do anything with it, then it's just knowledge.
Yeah.
You know?
But I'm also amazed how, just getting started on something that you were resisting, momentum kicks in. Even
Yeah, it does.
with an
Yeah, it
article,
does.
you write your first
Yeah.
sentence, and that's the hardest sentence.
Hmm.
And then it just, I wrote an article today. It didn't take me long, half an hour, poof, just came. But
Yeah,
some
I
people will
find.
say, well, I've been thinking of an article. Well, what's your first sentence? I don't have one yet. Well, write a bad sentence. Start with
Yeah,
something,
yeah, and I
Yeah.
think also it's really interesting. I think I always used to physically write the article,
Yeah.
and then I would agonize over the first lines or whatever. And now I've actually changed the process. I just record it. Now I happen to use Evernote, but you could use anything that transcribes. It automatically transcribes, and I just speak into the phone. It creates the framework,
Great.
and
Yeah.
and it's also so much easier. I don't have to sit there thinking, "Am I near a computer? Am I here or whatever?" You're just walking somewhere. You think of something, you write it down. You just speak it. It automatically transcribes and does a very good job. And then very often what I do is I clean it up with ChatGPT and then say, "Oh, no, I don't actually like it. I'm just going to use what I did." So it's really interesting how things like AI with language models like ChatGPT have really helped push things along. There's no excuse for not putting out content.
Yeah, there's fewer and fewer excuses, and it's can be really fun because it's like you're not just you. It's like there's other tools that are really interacting with you to come up with stuff. So
Yeah, and even if it's
yeah,
just I sometimes just use it for ideas, and I say, okay, look, I want them. What are 3 ideas I can talk about here? Here's the framework, and it goes chung 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 chung, and I
right.
say, oh yeah, I like them, I don't like them.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in what you were a client of mine. You were in a
Mm-hmm.
program of mine. I can't even remember which program at the top
A
of my
couple of
head,
them.
but what?
A couple of them.
A couple of them. So what is currently your primary way that you find new clients?
Primarily, they tend to come off LinkedIn,
LinkedIn. Okay.
but not only. So I do make calls and just introduce myself.
How do you do
Um,
that? This, by the way, making calls to people that you don't know is the number one fear of human beings. Let me see. Call someone I don't know
mhm,
or be
mhm.
shot at dawn. In many cases, it's that bad.
It's the
Just
yeah.
shoot
Look,
me.
yeah, just shoot me, get it over with.
Yeah. How do you
Yeah.
introduce yourself?
Okay. What I say is, okay. So generally speaking, where if it's someone I'm connected to on LinkedIn, I'll ring them up and say, "Hey, listen, we're connected on LinkedIn, and I thought it would be worthwhile just furthering the connection. Have you got, can we do that?"
Yep.
Um, Probably 95% people will have a conversation, hear
Yeah.
you out. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are people who say, "Look, I'm not interested," or whatever, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I have found that has been really quite interesting is I've been just using some LinkedIn automation that sends out birthday greetings, work anniversary, and job changes.
Okay.
And I've just written a little canned script that goes out. It's resulted in conversations. In fact, I had a client come off one of those automations, And I said to him, and it was just a pretty generic. We connected. I sent him a thank you. I then sent, hey, listen, can we talk about helping each other, how we can, help each other's businesses grow? The guy sends me a message saying, can we talk? Became a client. And I asked him, I said, well, what triggered this? And he said, well, you asked.
Yeah, we should highlight that. If you don't ask, you can't get a response. So the thing is to find a way that of asking that's not sleazy. I started a podcast, and every day I get an email from someone in India that says I can get 1 million subscribers if only we would talk.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And all of them are they're terribly written. You get no sense of their identity. They're awful. But I got one today that was pretty good. It's also a canned thing, but at least he wrote it well, and it sounded like he was credible. I mean, would you respond to something like that?
No.
Can you speak in a normal tone of voice and sound intelligent and have some kind of connection?
Yeah, and I think if you come across personably, you don't sound like it's a robot.
Right.
Yeah, generally people will, they'll engage, at least for a couple of minutes.
Sure.
And if they don't, they don't. I mean, what does it matter, really?
Right. Well, I'm glad you found some ways to plug in that way.
Yeah, I think there's ultimately, look, it was really interesting. So this client I was talking about, where I interviewed senior executives, and one is basically global senior executive for a very large logistics company. Okay, and I spoke to him just on Monday, and I said, well, okay, so if I was going to send you a cold email and say, what are the top 3 priorities, or these are the top 3 priorities that I believe that you would be facing. What would those priorities be? Because I'm trying to figure out what his priorities were for my client. Okay.
Yeah.
And he made an interesting observation. He said, look, I get 30 of those a day. These are my top 3 priorities. I said, I'm not interested, he said. What I'm interested in is so somebody contacted me on the phone. There was a relationship. I could have a conversation with somebody. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. Okay. And I think this is where we feel very often that senior executives won't make the time, don't have the time. But in my experience, generally the higher you go in the tree, the more likely they are to be nice people.
Well, yeah, interesting.
And they don't have the armor that a lot of the middle people have.
I'm
not trying to protect my patch.
Yeah. That's interesting.
We
always think the top person is the highest person to reach, but you're saying not always.
No. And usually they're the ones who will have the conversation with you. As long as you can have, say something of value to them, something that insight you could bring to them, they're happy to have the conversation.
Yeah, great.
Might be hard to get to them, but they're happy to have the conversation.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing how connections have changed. I mean, when I started my business back in the dark ages, there was no internet, there was no LinkedIn, there was no email. I started without email. I had a typewriter. That's all I did. And I started out by doing a workshop. I did a workshop, and I rewrote that workshop 27 times or something that I typed out. And then finally, when I got my first computer, I developed a mailing list. Not an email list. Email didn't exist. It's hard to believe email didn't exist.
Oh, look, we both grew up in the era where email didn't exist. And, direct mail still cuts through and still works if you can afford it.
Yeah, it worked for me.
Yeah.
Got me going. Took a while, but it worked.
Yeah, it does work.
So what do you find, What's top of mind for the kinds of clients that you work with? What's their biggest concern? What are people struggling with the most these days?
Look, I think right now, I think it's getting harder and harder to get people to make decisions and actually spend money. They tend to
Hmm.
be more risk averse, especially in larger organizations. And smaller organizations as well, because the cost of living over here is the big factor that everybody talks about. So it is getting difficult to show a value proposition that would help them grow. So sales would be, for a lot of them, sales is a big issue. Because it's interesting. I speak to people and I say, okay, so you've got a business, and they say, yeah, but I don't, the business is doing okay because we're applying all our money into the business, but we're not actually making any money. We're not actually taking a salary. We're not actually doing anything that. And I'm going, well, why are you doing this? Okay,
Yeah, really.
yeah, really. I mean, so my thing is, you're in business, and really to make money, to increase your personal wealth, however you want to put that. Um, as you grow the business and have a business, if it's in a traditional business sense, that you could sell for a multiple decent figure, which of course means that it has to run ostensibly without you, and you have to have all these structures in place. But none of that would happen if you're not making money in the first place. If you can't sell, none of that would happen because people are buying your ability, the business's ability to actually acquire clients and service those clients. And I'm saying, if you're not doing those, if you're not doing that and you're not making money, why are you doing this? Oh, yeah, I want to make an impact. I want to do all of this, but you can't make an impact if you're not making money. And I really like what Alan Weiss said the other day when you interviewed him. And he said, look, it's about discretionary time. The money gives you the discretionary time if you do it right.
Yeah. So what are the mistakes people are making that they're not paying themselves well enough? What are you seeing? What have you seen?
I think they have this feeling that I need to grow the business because the business, I have to bring on all these people. I have to do this, that, and the other. But there's no eye on profitability. The eye is on revenue, but not profitability.
Hmm.
And because of that, they think that, this thing is going to be valued at whatever it is, and somebody's going to buy this thing. But the reality is, without profit, no one's going to buy it. Okay.
Right, right.
And I see that as a big mistake. The other mistake that I see is people hang on to the wrong people for too long, especially in a sales arena or even a delivery arena. They don't have sales processes. They don't have a systematic way of bringing in and onboarding a client. I'll give you an example. So, I've got a client, they have something like 500 leads a year from referrals.
Yeah.
Okay, which is a pretty damn good place to be.
Yeah, really.
Okay,
If you can convert them.
if you can convert them. So, what is the actual conversion process, and what are the actual metrics? Okay, you're getting these leads, but how many of those leads are actually qualified because they need certain criteria for them to be a client? How
Yeah.
many of those people? So when you really narrow it down, out of those, say, 500, it might only be 100 that actually would qualify because you're getting these referrals. Fantastic. Out of that 100, what is your process for actually making sure that those people, as much as possible, become clients? Because you've still got a lot of competition in the field that they're in. Okay.
Sure.
So how do you demonstrate? So how do you ascertain what these people want? And it's all about wealth creation in this particular case. How do you ascertain what these people want, what their goals are, why they can't do it themselves? Why they're coming for help? Yeah. And what is your specific model for helping them do this? And more, I'm moving to visual models.
Okay.
So whether it's a triangle or a set of Venn diagrams or whatever it is,
Sure.
it's a visual model that shows someone that there is a process of what you're going to do, not how you're going to do it, but what you're going to do. Okay. And that helps embed. And it also keeps the so-called salesperson or the consultant on track, because you know that there's a process. You have to take people through the process, close the doors. Now, here's an interesting example. So I was talking to a client yesterday, and she mentioned that a couple of days ago, she had a phone call with somebody who just said, "Oh, look, just it was a referral. Yes, I want to go ahead. Just tell me what to do." And she spent, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes on the phone with him, or even less, because he was sort of really, just get on with it. That was 3 days ago. Yesterday, I'm listening to her on the phone, and this same person needs to go through the whole process. Okay? So she had to explain step to step, what needed to happen.
Right.
So I said to her, "What did you learn from this?" And she said, "Even if they sound like they were in a hurry, go through the process, because shortcuts always become long cuts in the long." So I thought it was an interesting example of, you have a process. This is what we do. This is how we do it. If you short circuit it, you're probably likely to get a client who's not very good. They're not going to listen to you, or you're gonna start having problems further down the track for whatever reason, or the sales is not going to happen.
My sales process, I kind of played hard to get. By the time I got someone on the phone, they already knew about me. They'd read information about me. And so I said, "What's your issue? What are you struggling with? What's not working for you?" I never talked about myself and what I did.
Yeah, and exactly, because it's that old thing.
People aren't good at that. They would say, "Well, let me tell you all the stuff that we do," and they go, "Ha, let me think about it."
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't work.
It doesn't work. It never has worked. But I think we do that because we think that we've been in business for 50 years or whatever. The company's been around, but who cares? No one cares. I only care about what you can do for me today.
Yeah. So, tell me some of your the breakthroughs that you've had in a business. Maybe one, maybe two. I don't know. Things that really shifted things for you. Like, I shifted in a lot of different ways. Oh, I could do that, and do the newsletter, do this, that. So many things that I established as a process that continued to give me results. What kind of things for you?
I think the biggest lesson that I'm an options person, and I love bright, shiny objects. And I went, I could offer that service, or I could offer that service, or I could offer that service. So I'm really good at conflict resolution and mediation. Or I could do that, okay? Or something else comes along because somebody wanted some sort of help. Oh, yeah, that would be good, okay? I think the one thing more and more that I'm forcing myself back in is one thing, one service, one type of client, one way of delivery. Or, there can be a couple of ways of delivery, but certainly one type of client, one type of service. Okay. The delivery, when I say a couple of ways, it could be one-on-one, or it could be one-to-many. Yeah. And the major message, if you like, is I'm going to help you do two things. One is make money in your business as we go along, because the whole thing is about being able to buy and keep paying for assets. And a typical example of that would be if you were investing in property. You buy the property, but then you've always got a shortfall. There's money that has to go in to keep paying for this property until you can sell it at some point. Okay, right. It's just the way it is. So even if you had 10 or 15 or 20 or properties, there's a lot of money that's coming out of your pocket every month. So you've got to be able to pay for that. Okay. And the other thing is to have the business set up in such a way that you could sell it for a multiple whatever figure of turnover or whatever it is, or profitability. Okay, those two things have to happen. And so rather than go, I could do this and I could do this and I could do this, my thing is I work with business owners to do that.
How many years did it take to get to that?
24. I've always sort of, dabbled on the edges and gone, okay, this, that, the other, yeah, and then change the message. And, oh, yeah, today I'm going to do something else. But what I found was people would say to me, hey, Rashid, I don't actually know what you do. I'm confused about what you do because it's like a Chinese menu. You've got all these different things.
Well,
What do
some
you do?
people do that. We do all, you need something, we do everything. And that doesn't really instill confidence in me.
No.
But if you say, we're the people who are best at, specialize in, and can get you results in this area where you told me you had a problem.
Yeah.
Some version of that instills confidence, right?
Yeah. So I say, look, we can work with someone who's got somewhere on average between 10 and 100 people. They run a business, not a practice. They run a business. This is what they want to get out of this. For instance, I've got a client. He says, look, within 2 to 3 years, I want to be in a position where I can be the figurehead and the business runs. Okay, great. Okay, now we know.
Yeah, I can help you with that.
I can help you. So everything we do means we have to have the right people. We have to have the right processes. We have to have all of these different things. And then he said, okay, I said, where's your biggest issue? My biggest issue is conversion. I'm getting, masses of leads, but it's the conversion.
That's interesting because I found that the easiest thing.
So do I, frankly, but not everybody does. But
No, because their selling process sucks, know, and so it's always aligning. Okay, do you have this need? Does it hurt enough? Are you struggling enough? Are you whatever?
Yeah, and the other thing that I've also realized is it always comes down to a matter of timing. Okay,
Sure.
Timing and priorities. As somebody put it to me, he says, look, we've all got top 2 or 3 priorities. And if this isn't one of them, or if something else comes on top, that's going to take precedence over whatever it is that you wanted to do. So it always comes down to timing.
Yeah, well, or urgency,
Timing and urgency. Yeah.
It's like people are often selling things that people have a hard time justifying buying it. It sounds like a nice thing. Maybe it's something we'll get around to forever. And they think there's a problem in their sales process, but it's the problem of what they are offering. It just isn't the right thing. It isn't the right need. It doesn't connect with their bottom line somehow, right?
Yeah, well, if it's a nice to have, then something will always take precedence. So if you think about it this way, as small business owners or practice owners, we're interested in 2 things: revenue and profitability. Okay?
Right.
But an organization, a senior executive in an organization is probably more concerned with productivity and efficiency, which then lead to bottom line revenue and profitability. Okay.
Right.
But you have to know what you're selling. You have to know what those hot buttons are. So when I'm coaching people to deal with senior executives, I say, okay, you want to improve efficiency, you want to improve productivity, you want to reduce your headcount by automating these processes, which do 2 things. One is it improves your bonus because that's what they're interested in personally. It improves their standing in the organization, and of course, the risk is if it doesn't work, then that's why they kibosh a deal. And ultimately, it improves revenue and profitability, which means that I get more money. It's not hard, but people don't boil it down into those 4 things.
Yep. Let's change the topic a bit for a second. We talked about AI to begin with, and AI is it's the biggest thing since computers. We've had computers for under 50 years, really, in terms of the personal computer, and that transformed the ability for us to do things. But AI seems to have, ridiculous potential. And are you finding in the people that you're talking to that are they taking on AI? Are they using ChatGPT? Do they have no idea? What do you think the potential is for you and your business in using it?
I think people are aware of it, or at least my clients tend to be aware of it, and they want to use it. It's a question of how do we use it, and the second question that always comes up is how do I protect the IP and not have the AI use it to learn for everybody else, if you know what I mean. Okay, which is a problem with ChatGPT as it stands at the moment, unless you have the enterprise, which is hideously expensive. So people are looking at and saying, okay, how can I encapsulate this, and how can I then make my business processes more efficient? What I found, and different AI models do different things. I use Google's Notebook.lm quite extensively, which is a closed system. So you upload documents and whatever, and it basically stays there. It doesn't train Google on anything. And I find that really useful because I have a client who basically does a strategy session with his clients, which then needs to be translated into something that the staff can then implement. And I said, okay, so you record this thing, we transcribe it. Any number of different ways you can do that. And then I put it into something like Google Notebook.lm, and I say, here is this is the structure I want. And it just goes chung, 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 chung. Here it is. It can be given to the next person down the line without them having to listen to the whole thing. Or also it means that the person doing the strategy work doesn't have to then say, okay, another recording, this is what needs to happen. So it can be incredibly useful. And we're also looking at cases where it can be used to encapsulate all of their institutional knowledge and then basically use that in different ways.
I think we might underestimate how much people are interested in AI, because doing my Ordinary Visionaries Live the other day, I put out, I'm going to show you ways that I use it. And I went from 11 signups to 91 in 2 days.
Wow. Okay.
So I went, oh, there's really an interest there. People want to know how to use this. Way back when it was websites and this, that, and the other thing. But I think the leading edge for a long time is going to be how you can streamline or do this with AI. People want to know because it's complex and people don't know where to start. So I think it's a good opening for some consultants to say, well, let's look at how we can implement AI in your business to get the kind of results that you want. Save time, avoid repetition, whatever. I use it in this. This gets transcribed automatically, and then I run it through ChatGPT, and it gives me a summary in 15 seconds.
That's right, exactly. I mean, I use Otter to do the transcription, even though Zoom will do a transcription.
Yes.
And I actually find that Otter does a better job than ChatGPT at the summary most of the time. But then I'll also shove it through ChatGPT just to see if there are any nuances. But here's a real example of how I use it. Okay, so if I'm having a sales call with somebody and they all get recorded, and I put it through Otter or ChatGPT, and it then gives me a complete summary of what was discussed, which I then tweak very slightly, send off to the client, and there's your proposal.
Right.
What used to take hours because you'd record something. Okay, you speak to them for an hour. It takes another hour and a half. You start. Oh, what did they say? The exact wording, etc., etc., etc. Now it's all done within seconds. So the productivity improvement is massive.
Yeah. I'm waiting for the time where we can have a neural link with AI. But I just watched a movie about that, very exciting movie with, anyway, there's this big machine and they're plugged into the machine and it's like connecting your intentions to what AI can actually do. And it was kind of fun and exciting. Yeah. Probably ridiculously dangerous as well.
Probably, but fun anyway. Yes.
Yeah. Well, we're going in that direction.
We are.
that
We
kind
are.
of thing is
Mm.
gonna happen. So some kind of neural link, so you don't have
Yeah.
to think too much. It just I don't know. Well, I'll probably be dead and gone by the
Probably.
time that happens and the robots take over. But
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Well, if any, I mean, you probably read Isaac Asimov. Isaac Asimov.
Asimov,
Asimov. Thank you. I, Robot and the whole Foundation series and whatever. So it's interesting where
I've
it could
watched the
go.
movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's an interesting parallel with one of the Foundation. So he wrote 3 Foundation series books, and I think it might be the third one where there is because the whole thing was mapped out by the robots, and they said, oh, this is what's going to happen over the next God knows how many 100 years or whatever. But then there was a maverick who turned up, and I see a real parallel with our friend Donald turning up, um, and what's happening. So it's really quite interesting because that was written God knows how many years ago.
Yeah, decades ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there'll always be people that are shaking things up and doing things in a new way and breaking the molds and the old paradigms, et cetera, et cetera. And yet it's so easy to be stuck in the old ones. And yet most of us can't imagine, except for me, who doesn't own a cell phone, um, wandering around without a cell phone. It's like we're so tethered to that. And the reason I don't have a cell phone, I don't go anywhere. Here I am,
Okay, fair enough.
I have email, I have everything else. But anyway, so what's next for you in your business? What's the leading edge for you? I don't know how long you plan to stay in business.
Oh, probably another. Look, I can't see any reason to stop in a traditional way.
Right.
What we want to do is to work 3 to 4 days a week.
Okay.
Okay. And and because what I've noticed, and I know this is not a nice thing to say, but I've noticed that people who have stopped at 60, 61, 62, even 65, their brain's going to mush.
Their brain's going to mush. That's why I keep doing the things I'm doing.
Yeah.
So my
Yeah.
brain will not go to mush, which I do not
Yeah.
want.
No, exactly. And I'm, and we're watching this and we're going, what did they talk about? Oh, they talked about their grandkids. They talked about the last trip they took. I mean, I'm going, this is as boring as batshit. I'm sorry.
That's what we'll call this interview. Don't be as boring as batshit. Yeah.
Why not?
Well,
Yeah,
it's true. It's true.
It's true. It's true. And I think unless you're, I mean, I look at my late father. He retired officially. Okay, he worked for the same company, multinational insurance company, for I don't know 50 something years. Okay, and then they got taken over, and then he still worked for them till he was about 60 something, and then he was made redundant at some point, and then he worked for somebody else for another 10 years, and then he went to school for seniors, which is like the University of the Third Age, so he did French and he did Spanish and he did this and he did that and he gave talks and this, that, and the other, and he died at 94.
Wow.
Yeah, wow is about right. Mentally as sharp as ever.
Wow.
Every other day, his body failed him. But that's another story. But every other day, I would get a phone call saying my computer's not doing something, and he was obsessed with backups. I was absolutely obsessed with them. But he was constantly on the computer. He was constantly on his phone. How does this work and how does that work and whatever. And I thought, there is a man who, and he's a massive reader, so he was constantly reading something or the other. So that is the sort of model where you keep your mind going. You're sharp till the end.
Yeah, well, that's good. I mean, when I retired, I didn't have a plan, but I knew I wasn't going to sit around doing nothing. So, the ideas came to me, and I started the podcast and continued my writing, but in a different direction.
Yeah.
Use ChatGPT 27 hours a day. which I should probably scale back on a bit. But yeah, so yeah, there's always a contribution to make. There's always something that we can add. There's always a difference that we can make. I think.
Yeah, I think so. And as long as there are people who are willing to listen, do
Right. Right.
find it useful, valuable,
Yeah.
keep doing it.
Yeah.
Why not? What's the alternative?
What's the alternative? Death.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or sitting in an old age home drooling. I'm sorry, but that really doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you don't have a choice, but
No, you don't. I agree, you don't. But as much as possible, I'd like to do everything possible to not have that happen.
Right. Right. Well, it's been fun talking to you, Rashid. I've always admired what you're doing and your stick-to-itiveness and your intelligence and your commitment to your work.
Oh, thank you. And
Yeah.
look, I've known you for a long time, ever since we started business. So, and I've always valued the insights that you provide and what you do. So it's mutual. So here's to another 25 years.
Well, I don't know. We'll see.
Who knows? Maybe we'll have those implants yet.
Yeah. Well, keeping up my exercise program so I'm in decent shape. Anyway, thank you very much for taking the time, Rashid. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, Robert.